Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1506 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. The Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, the best baseball in the city outside the Dome. Join me there at Christie Pitts, 2 p.m. on July 7th. I got Mike Richards and a cast of hundreds lined up, including CEO Keith Stein, the man with the plan. Join me then, again, July 7th. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Season 6 of Yes, We Are Open, an award-winning Moneris podcast hosted by FOTM Al Grego, and Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making her Toronto Mic debut, is Tamara Cherry.
Yay!
Tamara, I can tell you now, I can reveal this finally for the first time. I was so worried I would call you Tamara that I heard you on YouTube. I listened to you say Tamara, and I made a trick in my mind, like Tamara, like Mary, like Mother Mary. And I basically
People always
trained
call
myself.
me Mother Mary. Just it's a common reference. So.
Well, you know, you're so holy. And I saw you when you arrived. I'm like, okay, I'm in the presence of greatness. Tamara Cherry, welcome to Toronto Mic.
Thank you for having me. And just so you know, Mike, I would not be offended if you called me Tamara.
What about Tammy?
You know what? Actually, so I would think that I'm talking to one of my aunties because my aunties, my late grandparents, they would call me Tammy. I was Tammy to them.
Right.
I have friends who are Tammy. Tammy Sutherland from Breakfast Television.
Of course.
She and I used to work in the field together for years. We were both crime reporters, and we called each other Tammy 1 and Tammy 2. I don't remember which one was which, but I love her. And my husband is from Brazil. So actually, when he says my name, quote unquote, correctly, it sounds really weird. And I'll be like, sometimes I'll just be like, just say it. He'll be like, Tamara. I'm like, it's so weird. But he usually says it like Tamara.
Tomato, Tamara,
yeah,
Tamara.
Ken Shaw at CTV used to call me Tomato.
What do you mean Ken Shaw? Ken Shaw.
Ken Shaw used to
Okay, I
call
love
me
these name drops.
Tomato.
All these great people who have never been in the basement, but keep it up. I like it. And maybe one day with your support, we'll get them to make their Toronto Mic debut. Because Ken Shaw is a guy, because I have a blind spot. I'm going to review. I had to share this with Dana Levinson when I first met her, that I don't actually consume any CTV news, and I only know from promos, and I know these people just because they're famous in our community.
Oh, that's
and I know you, even though I've never actually seen you on the news, but these names like Ken Shaw, like I didn't have to watch Ken Shaw to know how to do a Ken Shaw impression. Like he's just a pillar of the community, Ridley Funeral Home style. But Ken Shaw, does he take your calls?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't call him. It's okay. So I got a beef with you, Mike.
Oh God!
Because you've called.
I'm still warming you up.
You've called people on whether they're good friends with people based on whether they talk on the phone. How often do you talk to them?
Well, like, will they answer your text or
yes.
will they,
okay, so there's a lot
call?
of people that I consider like good friends who I maybe only talk to like once a year or once every couple, but people you meet that you just love. So Ken Shaw, I'm trying to think, do we ever text each other? He emails me every once in a while, or like, for example, especially with, I'm sure he'd be okay with me saying this, but like with all like the trauma research and I've done and everything, and I've been very public about certain things that I couldn't have imagined years ago being public about since leaving CTV. And every once in a while I'll get an email from Ken Shaw being like, Tomato, you were a great reporter, and that one story that you did was just so good, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, Ken, but I shouldn't have done it that way. I should have. And he'll send me these really long emails, and it's so
Well,
kind.
that's a friend. Are you kidding me? Like,
but
okay,
I
you're
don't
calling
text
me
them,
out
but
for what exactly?
Well,
like,
because say you ask people, be like, oh, okay, well, do you have them in your phone? I don't know if I have Ken's current number. I don't know.
Okay.
I know what his email address is.
Well, you know what what you are is you're basically mutually respecting colleagues is what you are. You're not friends.
When you're in a newsroom, it's often a family. I know it's so cliche, but it's true. And that's the hardest part about like leaving the business, honestly.
Well, we're going to talk about all this. Firstly, I need to know, are you related at all to Don Cherry?
I've never been asked that before.
Well, I'm here to ask all the tough questions. I can't believe you asked me
that. Oh my gosh, I didn't have a response prepared.
If not Don Cherry, then I need to ask you about Nina Cherry and Eagle Eye Cherry, because there's two famous Don Cherrys, you know.
No and no. Okay, so I have first no relation to Don Cherry that I'm aware of, but I do have a funny story about that. So it's so funny, like, yeah, maybe you've gotten this before. Like sometimes people can be very presumptuous based on your name. So when I worked at CTV, for example, sometimes people would email me and they'd be like, "Hi, Cherry." I'm like, did you just assume out of Tamara and Cherry that Cherry's my first name? I've actually gotten that multiple times. "Hi, Cherry." That said, I emailed Donovan Vincent at the Toronto Star the other day and my brain was so tired. I called him Vincent and I know him. I've had conversations with him. He's like, "And by the way, my name is Donovan." I'm like, I know that. My brain
it's his fault though. He's got two first names. I think he set you up to fail.
Apparently I do too. So anyway, when I was working at CTV, it was rare that I was actually in the newsroom, but one time I was in the newsroom and I went to my little buddy, but no, is it buggy? No. Locker, whatever. And I got my...
Where do they keep you guys at Bell Media?
Oh, in the dungeon. No, I'm just joking. No, I went into the newsroom. I went to my little mailbox and I had this package, this like big brown envelope, and I opened it up and there was this very professionally put together media package about some arena that was being proposed to be like a hockey arena that was going to be built in Mississauga or something. And it was addressed to me. It said, "Dear Miss Cherry, please share this with your father."
Your dad, Don.
I'm like, what? Wow. I'm like, first of all, how old do you think I am that you think Don Cherry is my dad? I think at that point I was probably like 30 or something.
No,
yeah, exactly.
You look like Don's great-granddaughter to me.
Yeah, right. There you go. Anyway, no relation to Don Cherry.
Okay, and then no Eagle Eye or
No. And there's also Paul Cherry, who is a journalist in Canada, not related to him.
Well, Garrett Joyce pointed out a long time, like many decades ago, there was a Globe and Mail writer with the last name Cherry, a woman, and whose first name I forget. But okay, so there are Cherries amongst us, and you're one of the Cherries that I picked to be on Toronto Mike. That's an FOTM. Thank you very much. See, tell 1010 I can make quips like that on the fly. Let them know I'm flying blind, no edits. Okay, you're here to go back to 1010 and say you should have seen what I witnessed today.
That's what I do too with my podcast. This is why I was so excited to come on with you.
Okay, do you want to do here? So I want to set the table, and then I want to do a little chat about lighter stuff.
I'm actually looking forward to the lighter stuff. That's why I'm so excited to be here.
But it will get heavy at some point because at some point I will discuss with you the trauma beat.
Yeah,
a case for rethinking the business of bad news. Like it does. I read this book of yours, and it's not light material.
Did you actually read it?
Yeah, like you sent me a book and I read it. Are you surprised by that?
I know, but so it's funny because I'm hosting a radio show in Saskatchewan next week and I'm going to have an author on, and I just saw in the calendar from the producer yesterday that there's going to be an author on and that apparently he had shared a copy of his book, and I said, "Can you send this to me? I'm not going to have time to read the whole thing."
But you'll do a good skim job. Let's so when I have on somebody like Ben Johnson and Mary Ormsby sends me the new book about Ben Johnson, you're right. Like I'm not going to read it every word like I'm reading Lord of the Rings or whatever, but I'm going to read it. I'm going to go through it all, and I'm going to kind of do this skim read, okay? I'll confess. I can't read every word of every book I'm sent. But why are you on the radio in Saskatchewan? Where the hell do you live, Tamara Cherry?
Everywhere.
That's City
Everywhere,
TV.
all at once. I live in Regina.
I saw this, Regina, we'll get right back to it, but I did read your book, and I saw this name right here.
The following program contains adult themes, nudity, and coarse language. Viewer and parental discretion is advised.
So I read his name. That is the voice, of course. We'll call him Mark Daly. And when you said the word...
I didn't know that was his voice. Oh, yeah.
The following program contains adult themes, nudity, and coarse language. Viewer and parental discretion is advised.
Only one person sounds like that, okay?
Yeah.
But when you said the word everywhere, I then thought
City
of
News everywhere.
City TV everywhere.
Yes.
That's what old farts like me think when you're
Yes.
born and raised in Toronto. Okay.
Yes.
So you now live in Regina, and how long have you been living in? I won't even do a joke about the name Regina because that's
it's fine.
That's beneath me. Okay.
I've heard it. It's like, but I've never heard it before. Just like nobody's ever asked me if I'm related to Don Cherry.
Well, it all because you've been asked the question many times. That's more reason. Let's get this on the official, because when you die. And I'm doing some math in my head. It's going to be in 70 years. Okay. So when you pass away in 70 years, and Ridley Funeral Home is taking possession of your body to do
I've actually asked my family, send me back to Toronto.
Well, you might be here at that point. Who knows, right? But in 70 years,
not.
when you pass away, this conversation we're having now is going to be revisited by people who want to hear Tamara Cherry's story. I think this is actually going to become suddenly a very relevant episode, and I'll be long gone.
Skip the obit, just play my Toronto Mic'd episode, number 1000.
So then we need to find out, was this Don Cherry's daughter?
We need to fact check this.
Right, okay. So Mark Daly, I read his name in your book because he was on CP24.
City News. Well, then, City Pulse. What was it? Yeah.
There's a weird, we'll get into, well, you don't have to get into it, but City Pulse and City CP24, they had their divorce when Bell got one and Rogers had the other, and you know what that's like.
Yes.
Okay, so you're living in Regina.
Yep. I'm born and raised in Regina.
Okay.
Moved out to Toronto in 2006. Skipped my convocation from the University of Regina Journalism School to do an internship at the Toronto Star. Thought I'd be here for 4 months. It was my hairdresser here in Toronto who said, "You're going to be here longer than 4 months." I'm like, "No, I'm pretty sure my contract ends in September or whatever." He's like, "You just wait. You just watch." So then my contract was extended another 8 months. He's like, "You see?" And then it was another 4 months. He's like, "You see?" And then another month. And then 15 years later, I went back to Regina, one husband and 3 kids, heavier than when I left. And I've been there
since. But did you
since,
marry a Toronto guy or?
He's a brasileiro.
Oh yes, you're right.
He's Brazilian.
That. See, I'm not paying attention.
He was living here though. He had been here longer than me.
Okay.
But
what did he think about leaving Toronto for Regina?
Oh, I eased him into it. So he's from Sao Paulo, a city that has more people. The greater Sao Paulo area has more people than all of Canada. He went from Sao Paulo to Toronto. Oh, the small town of Toronto.
Right.
And then I got him out to Ajax after we had our first kid. Okay, this is a very small center, which feels bigger because it's connected to the GTA.
Sure.
And then I eased him into Regina. And he was, honestly, I've got the most amazing husband ever. He's always just been if I say something, what if I do this? Like when I quit my job, well, we can discuss that.
Well,
I'm sure you'll ask me about what does it mean? Did you quit? Were you fired? Blah, blah, blah. When I left CTV, he was never like, oh, I don't know. Like me being the main breadwinner, I've always been the main breadwinner in our family. He was never like, oh, can we make it work? It was like, okay, how can I support you? And it's the same when we went to Regina. I wanted to be close to my family and all my nieces and nephews and stuff like that. And
well, you're from there. It makes sense to, if you're from there, it makes sense you'd want to go home again. I just wondered how he's adapted to
He's adapted very well. He's into jiu-jitsu there. He's got his little jiu-jitsu community. He's also very antisocial, so he could really get along very, very well.
So he's going to love Regina.
He loves it. We've been there for 3.5 years now. 4.5 years. I don't know. 2020, October. It's
but how is it, Tamara? Again, we're going to bounce around, but I'm keeping track in my adult brain.
Keep me on
here.
my toes.
But how are you making 10/10 appearances from? So you're doing it from your home in Regina? Like, is this like you're just phoning it in?
It's so funny. Well, not phoning it in, Zooming it in when I'm on 10/10. So I don't know if you're aware of this, Mike, but I actually started hosting shows for 10/10 and across the iHeartRadio Talk network during the pandemic, but everybody was virtual at that point.
Right.
So I'm like, when I started doing roundtables on 10/10, it was shortly after I left CTV. So it was early. You know when it was? It was right after Christy Blatchford died.
Oh.
And then they asked me to start doing a roundtable because they had me on talking about her. And I started on the roundtables, and I think that I was in studio with John Moore 3 or 4 times before the pandemic hit. It's like suddenly we went home. And then when I moved to Regina, the following October, I was like, well, goodbye, Toronto. You will never want to talk to me again. And I get there and Mike Ben Dixon, who was running the station at the time, said, hey, you want to try hosting your own show? I'm like, I don't know I have no idea how radio works. I don't know anything about the radio. He's like, what if you started on like a weekend show? I'm like, no, that's my time with my kids. He's like, what if you did some fill-in work? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And I did it and I loved it. So for like a few years or a couple of years, whatever it was, I've done fill-in radio hosting over Zoom from home. But now they don't really call me anymore. I think it's because it's like, maybe the gig is up. People know she's in Regina. I've never been secretive about it.
But you were on yesterday.
That's a roundtable. It's a weekly. It's a weekly roundtable.
I don't hear any 1010. I need to learn from you.
So
okay.
and then I always talk about on the roundtable that I'm in Saskatchewan and I give that Saskatchewanian perspective. But yeah, when I'm in town, I like to make an in-person appearance and see all these people that I love in person.
Okay, I'm catching up now in the Tamara Cherry story here. Now, when do they have other guest hosts who are remote on 1010, or is everybody at like 299 Queen or whatever?
So last night I was on with Jim Richards for his like national show that runs from I think 7 to 11.
Right.
And we actually pre-taped a segment, and so I think I was in the studio, I think at like 5 o'clock, and his studio where we do pre-records there is right next to the Rush studio. And it might be
which is hostless right now.
Or whatever. And the chair was empty. I'm like, who's hosting?
Right.
He's like, it's Shane. I'm like, where is he? He's like, in Alberta. I'm like, what?
See.
So I'm like, okay, but they're not calling me anymore.
So
I thought it was because I was in Saskatchewan.
Okay, but who should be calling you is now program director at 640. You with me here?
Mike Ben Dixon?
Mike Ben Dixon's the guy who said, hey, Tamara, I like how you sound and you belong on our airwaves. And he made that happen, and it turned out you were great. That's why you were literally on a round table yesterday. Mm-hmm. He now has the same power at the rival station. Chorus owns 640. Now, I have to check the time if there still is a chorus. Okay. So
oh, my God. Seriously.
9:30. I think there's still a chorus for a little longer here. So, but have you talked to Mike Ben Dixon?
So it's funny you say that because Mike had, I think...
Oh, that's my. You know what that is? That's my.
That's Mike calling. He's like, "What? Tamara's on? Can you ask her?"
Believe it or not,
host?
I'm almost embarrassed to tell you. That is actually. This is how old I am. I'm almost embarrassed to tell you because you're so.
I know how old you are. You're 50 this month, and I want to say happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Have you had your birthday yet?
No, it's actually we're celebrating at Great Lakes Brewery on June 27 from 6 to 9 p.m. Everybody's invited, including Jim Richards.
A little birthday present.
Oh my God! I see you're paying attention. I love that. But that sound of Neil Young singing "Heart of Gold" is the sound of Mike. You have to take your blood thinner, okay? Honestly, that's what that is. So what actually, I'm going to, in a minute.
Oh, it's okay. I thought you were talking to Mike Ben Dixon.
I am.
Too many mics.
Mike Ben Dixon and I did have quite the chat, actually, at a movie theater in South Etobicoke where he was attending the premiere of a documentary that was made about Great Lakes Brewery turning 30.
Interesting.
And we had Jerry Agar was there. It was quite the conversation. And I feel like that was a private chat, so I won't share too many details. But man, I wish I had recorded my Mike Ben Dixon story. But back to Mike Ben.
I really want to know. I really want to know what was said in this conversation.
You can chat with me after
You always
this.
ask people to dish. Come on, spill the tea, Mike.
Yeah, but I always have to tell myself, is it my story to tell? Is it my story to tell? Oh yeah, maybe not. Okay, so for this,
You're getting into the tenets of trauma-informed journalism, my friend.
Okay, well, we're going to, trust me, I carved out a whole segment of this to get heavy about the trauma beat, okay? But any opportunity for you to guest host on 640?
I kind of doubt it at this point. Mike, I don't remember if I had messaged him to say, I think probably I saw that he had become the program director there on LinkedIn or something. I probably messaged him to say,
you got that news right away.
Congratulations. No, honestly.
Somebody texted you and said, oh, Ben Dixon's now
Nobody
at
ever texts me anything. So you're going to be disappointed because you're going to ask me a whole bunch of questions. What happened to this person? I don't know. Because I am so out of the
Do you think you're going to get Lisa LaFlamme questions? Because a lot of people were like, I'm glad you didn't ask about Lisa. And I'm like, I forgot about Lisa, A. B, I know nobody has anything to say about Lisa LaFlamme. Like, what are you going to say? You know, she was ousted, and I'm sure she got severed fairly, and she's going to do something else now.
I don't have inside info on so many things. So Mike Ben Dixon, I think that probably what happened, and Mike, I apologize if I'm getting this backwards or whatever. I think I sent him a message being like, congratulations. And because he had been, I don't want to say without a job, but he'd been consulting. He'd not been...
Yeah, he got anywhere from for a little while, and then he wanted to get back in the game, and that was 640.
Yeah, I think I said congrats, and I think he said, "Oh, if you're ever looking for whatever, there'd be a home for you or something." I don't remember.
And then what did you say?
And then I think that I said, oh, we should chat. And I don't think it ever happened. I think that he ghosted me. But now I just...
Let's negotiate via podcast, okay?
No, I don't even know if this is the thing. Like, these things fall into my lap sometimes. And I'm like, I never thought I'd be a TV reporter. I said, hell no, will you ever catch me in front of a camera unless I'm being interviewed? I never thought I'd be in radio, and then I do it, and I just kind of go with the flow. I'm honestly so busy with different things that I don't have time to pursue things.
Okay, so 640 kind of ghosted you right now, and who knows what will end up there. But
I don't want
hold on.
That makes it sound scandalous. It's not. It's just.
Do you? Oh no, it's not scandalous to be just ghosted. But when 1010's still calling you because they had you on the round table yesterday. Is there any concern that if you appear on 640, you're off the 1010 list?
No.
I'm asking.
I just go.
I'm asking the question.
I don't
these
get
are rivals.
paid to go on round tables or anything on 1010. And they haven't asked me to host me. I can do whatever the hell I want. I work for myself.
Okay.
This is the beauty of being an entrepreneur. I can speak out against who I want. I don't care. Right. I honestly don't give a... Okay. I know I'm allowed to say the F word on
You
this.
can say an
It
F
still
word.
feels wrong.
Okay. But it might be fun. I feel like I got Steve Paikin to say an F word and it was like exhilarating.
I don't give a fuck.
Yeah,
there
don't
you go.
You feel good?
I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I know you're planning on listening to this.
Oh my goodness. Okay. And that's not Don. And
I'm sorry, Great Grandpa Don. Great Grampy Gramps.
Oh man. He's like 90 years old now. My goodness gracious. Okay. So just so I understand a technical thing I've always been curious about. So when you were guest hosting on 1010,
I got paid for that, for sure.
Yeah, so I wasn't even going to ask that because I was going to ask you, is it literally via Zoom or is Zoom just sort of, is there another
literally
audio?
Via Zoom. There's a few platforms that they use.
It sounds to me like the fidelity of the audio could be better than Zoom. For a big fucking station like 1010.
Well, okay, so they have one, what's it called? I don't even remember. There's one that sometimes I connect over for the morning. See, this is so bad. You're getting me into the technical stuff. I could probably pull up my phone and find an email. But they have tried different things. There's been like an app, like when we first went remote with the pandemic, we tried out, there was some app that we would connect over. And I think I actually used it at CTV once to go live for something. And now there's, you can probably throw out names and ask me, did you use this?
No. I was just curious only because like if I'm like, who's a good example? Dave Van Horn. Okay. So Dave Van Horn lives in Florida. Longtime voice of the Montreal Expos. I just connected with him and it was fantastic. But the path of least resistance that I was satisfied with was Zoom. So literally we met on Zoom and I'm recording me like local and I'm recording him via the internet. So I know that I'm compromising some fidelity on his audio because he's traveling through the internet. And that's a sacrifice I personally am happy to make for Toronto Mike to make it easy for Dave Van Horn to get, a conversation on Toronto Mike that I wanted to have. But I just assumed that, big 1010, mighty 1010, Bell Media Station, that would be, the fidelity would be unacceptable.
They did send me a microphone and some sort of little audio board, something other. I don't remember.
Okay, so they like an XLR mic or something. And
I don't remember.
So that you'll sound at least like because that's how I'm set. Okay.
Yeah, but it's not as good over Zoom. It's not.
No more technical questions. I'm just curious because I myself am running a media empire trying to compete with Bell Media and Chorus. Wait, what time is it? Is there still a Chorus? Okay.
This is an amazing little studio.
Rogers, thank you. It's not too small?
No, it's intimate. It's cozy. God. I should be a realtor.
Music to my ears. Yeah, it's you say charming.
It's a cottage feel. Charming. Yeah, it's charming.
One last question before I play this. I'm going to play like a trailer. I'm going to call it like an intro to the Trauma Beat podcast because that'll set the table a little bit. Then we'll get into it. And while that's playing, I can run up and literally take my Apaxaban so that I don't have like some kind of a stroke.
I'd rather you not die in my presence.
Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. If I die,
yes,
drop me off
at where you're going.
14th and Lakeshore, and Brad will take it from there. You'd mentioned the Rush on 1010. Now, when the Rush launched, these two gentlemen were FOTMs. One was let go. The other went to Montreal, shout out to Mad Dog. And then there was the replacement were two more FOTMs. You're now an FOTM, Tamara. So
thank
welcome.
you. By the way, it took me a while to figure out what that meant. I'm always feeling out of the loop on acronyms. I was like, flavor of the month? I Googled it. That's what came up. Yeah. And then I thought it was first on Toronto Mic'd. And now I know it's friend
of Toronto Mic'd.
Yes.
And I like it being like a inside baseball. It's you either know or you don't. And if you don't, whatever. Like you'll earn it and then you'll feel like you're in the club. Okay, so you're an FOTM.
Thank you.
But where I'm going is, so Scott MacArthur came over to tell his story. He literally had this epiphany and he up and quit the Rush.
I didn't hear that episode.
You really do need his return. So he had his initial...
I didn't know. I never knew what happened to him.
Shout out to Pride Month. Okay, I'm going to educate you real quickly here. Then I got to start this and get that pill. But
get your pill.
Shout out to Pride Month because Scott MacArthur's first visit was a very intimate conversation about him coming out as a proud gay man. And then his second visit was him talking about what the fuck happened because he left the Rush mysteriously, sort of. And now the man lives in Nova Scotia. And what happened, and he was very honest and upfront about basically his mental health, this epiphany, why he could no longer be on the air at 10:10. But now I'm going to ask you about somebody who I had the best chat with. I'm having a great chat right now, but I had the best chat with Reshmi Nair.
Aww.
What chemistry. Like, my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
Love this woman. Then suddenly I'm getting these reports like, Reshmi's not on the air anymore. We haven't heard from her in 2 months. It's been 5 months. It's been a year.
I know.
Clearly, Reshmi Nair is no longer with Bell Media, but I haven't heard a peep out of her, and I thought she was practically a buddy.
I know. I don't know what happened. Honestly, Reshmi, if you're listening to this, please know that I've been thinking about you. And actually, when I heard, because I had actually, because I do public relations type stuff, and I had actually pitched something to the Rush, and I had sent a message to her producer, Ben Harrison. And he said, I said, I think that this would be a great conversation with Reshmi in particular. It was a really important issue that I thought she would do really well with it. And he said, I'm sorry, Tamara, but Reshmi's no longer here. I'm like, what? He's like, just as of today, we don't know what happened. It was like the day that she left or the day after, whatever he had, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know what happened. So I immediately went to send her a text message and I didn't have her number in my phone. And I think I tried emailing. I think it bounced back immediately, but I've not been able to reach out to her. And I know that sounds really awful because Tamara, you are an investigative journalist. Surely you could find Reshmi. But I also don't want to prod. I don't know what happened, but I was sad to see that she was gone.
I would just say I always felt, I don't know what this says about me, but I always felt she was a TV star, and I was always surprised that she was on the radio. Well, I don't know what that means at all.
Radio is a lot of fun.
Radio is a lot of fun, but I just felt like she's a TV person, and now you're on the radio, and then I wondered if TV was in her future, but now we realize whatever's in her future is not with Bell Media, and I have no more insight than you do.
I don't know, but it honestly saddens me, and if she is listening to this, Reshmi, love you. Don't know what happened. Miss hearing you on the radio. Okay,
she's a wonderful woman. And Reshmi, what's at me, will you? I want to get you back on Toronto Mic'd and talk about all this. Okay, so I'm going to set the table by playing a introduction to the Trauma Beat. This is literally your podcast. And then this will kind of start us off. Then I'll ask a few annoying questions about your career, like how you didn't want to be on TV. How did you end up at CTV Toronto? And why did you leave CTV Toronto? And then we're going to talk about the Trauma Beat. We're going to cover a lot of ground, but this will give me an excuse to go upstairs and get my pill. So
and stay alive.
I think this is the first time in the history of Toronto Mic'd I literally had to leave the studio to take my pill.
It'll
make
me feel better, but when I have to go pee in like 45 minutes from now.
Well, do you want to go pee now
I'm
during
good
this?
now.
Because you've heard this intro.
Yeah, I've heard it a couple times.
Because now's a good time, because this intro is going to be a good two minutes here. But I was going to say, the reason this has never happened before is because I think you asked for 9 a.m. Am I right? Or did I ask for 9
I don't remember how it happened.
I think you did.
And I was late.
Only by 5 minutes.
7 minutes. Mike, you're
Who's
being
counting?
kind.
I'm kind to first timers. If you're late again, you're out of here.
I was so embarrassed and ashamed.
Did you know, because I'm about to press play on this, but did you know you're leaving here with fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery? Did I make that clear?
No.
Okay, so there's beer for you.
Thank you.
And I know you're not in town on June 27, and I teased it by saying we're celebrating my 50th at June 27.
Yes.
That's TMLX 15 at Great Lakes Brewery. Palma Pasta is going to feed everybody.
That is amazing.
And
how many people are you expecting?
Is
it going to be like one frozen lasagna that you're throwing in the oven? They're going to feed my family.
They send food for hundreds. It's unbelievable. And they have it buffet style.
That is amazing.
It's amazing.
Do they actually pay you for their sponsorship or do they just give you food?
No, both.
It's amazing. And how big is your deep freeze? And do they just drop it off once a week?
No.
I've always wondered.
Okay, so, I don't have a deep freeze. So that's the problem. I can only fit in my freezer 4 at a time. So literally, I have to be really... it's upstairs. It's the bottom of my...
It's your main freezer?
I don't have a
Your main
freezer.
home freezer is where you keep all these frozen lasagnas you give to people.
All these is 4. So I have to plan out. So I basically send a note to the owner, Anthony, and I'm like... I need 4 meat lasagnas for Monday morning. And he's like, you got it. And then so the delivery comes approximately once every, 10 days or something. It depends how many people come over. Sometimes, for example, I'm having a band over and there's like 3 guys. I'm like, I need 3 lasagnas. So sometimes it's multiple orders a week. But this is, I'm telling you, Tamara, and you can relate to this. I book the guest, I do the research, I record, I do the technical part, I have to do the accounts receivable, the accounts payable, the sales, and I have to manage the lasagnas
I do
and
everything.
the beer.
Yeah. I can't believe, is this a...
Well, it's in my freezer. So when you leave...
Okay.
Tamara, that is an empty box for so you know what's coming. And
it's
then
a nice box.
When you, the box itself is probably $5. When you leave, it'll be full of a large meat lasagna. And palmapasta.com, that's where you go for delicious, authentic Italian food. Quickly here, before I press play, I have a book for you on the history of Toronto Maple Leafs baseball.
This is awesome.
They play their home games at Christie Pitts here in Toronto, the city you left for Regina. Yes. And I'm going to be there July 7th.
You say it like a Saskatchewanian. You don't say Toronto.
I've been told that.
Like a Toranian.
I don't like it when we judge people for how they say the name Toronto.
Well, I judge you for how you say Saskatchewan, because it's Saskatchewan. I've heard you on the show saying Saskatchewan.
How do you say it?
You put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. It's Saskatchewan. It's like you're saying like Saskatchewan, like Saskatchewan Roughriders win.
My first wife was from Saskatoon.
Oh, so you're saying it wrong on purpose.
No.
Is this a bitterness thing? This is like part of the divorce. You're like, you got this, but I get to say Saskatchewan for the rest of my life.
No, I'm trying to keep my brand of guy who mispronounces half the words. I said Tamara right. But I did a lot of homework on that one here. But okay, so... I'm there July 7th, but there's a great Father's Day game. People should come out to. I went to the game last Sunday and it was amazing. But high caliber baseball in a great environment really cool. And no ticket required. You just show up and then you can now drink. This is how civilized we are, Tamara. You can drink a beer on the hill at Christie Pitts watching this baseball, and the cops can't do anything to you. Like it's illegal.
Do you think they'd really care about that sort of thing, though?
We don't have to find out. Like I'm king of drinking beers in parks. I've been doing it forever. But I also am aware that it gives a cop a reason to bug you. Like I think we can remove that.
Yes.
Also, that's the other thing too. I'm well aware of my entitlement as a blue-eyed white man. So I always wonder, like, oh yeah, no one's bugging me, so nobody's bugging anybody. And then it's like, wait a minute here. Like, not everybody it looks like me. Maybe this is an excuse to harass people of color. I don't want that to even exist. So let's make it legal and civilized. Anyway, right now it is.
Let's all be civilized.
Let's be civilized. Like, yeah. And let's those who can't be responsible drinkers in a park, let's deal with them for violating the law and not police everybody like a nanny state and just say like, no, but none of you can drink a beer in a park because some guy had one too many and then, I don't know, took a pee at the tree or something.
Isn't it crazy though how long this city has talked about freaking drinking in the park? Was it John Tory that wanted to bring it in? Like that was one of his things?
I don't know.
It's like, honestly, as a weekly roundtable pundit, I can't believe how many times we talked about drinking in parks.
Are you friends of John Tory? Former 1010 host.
No, and I'm not saying that in a way that, no, I don't like that guy.
Is he the future host of The Rush?
Not that I'm aware. I hope not.
No talks in the hallways yesterday about John Tory.
I didn't see any John Tory yesterday. There's no John Tory to be seen. But I actually enjoyed when John Tory was a co-host of The Rush. Remember, like way back before when he was setting up his mayoralty bid?
100%.
I actually enjoyed, but no, not that I'm aware of. But John Tory, I've talked to him on the radio many times.
Do you know that affair he had, we'll call it that, may not have been sexual? Do you know this? I have on this program once a quarter Edward Keenan from the Toronto Star. Mm-hmm. Also a one-time host at 1010, as I recall. But now I think he does 640 stuff. He? Yeah, I think he had a weekend show on 1010. I believe so. I believe so. Anyway, now he's on 640 at times. But bottom line is, we have these chats and we went great depth into this. And there's no evidence of any. It's an inappropriate relationship.
Does it matter if it's sexual?
It doesn't. Well, no, but it's funny how. Because it is inappropriate to have that kind of relationship with a city staffer. Like, I don't care about his marriage, to be honest. That's between him and his wife or whatever. But there was inappropriate city staffer optics, and then you find out maybe they were traveling on the city's dime. And there's a bunch of stuff that's, to have that relationship with your staffer is inappropriate when you're mayor of the city. But it is interesting. We all just assumed that this was a sexual relationship. But
did we? Because I was trying not to picture that.
I think the words I heard, the 4 words I heard were John Tory sex scandal, and none of those words seem to belong together. But
well, he was known as No Story Tory.
Right.
I remember Betsy Powell, who I worked with at the Star, and then many years like just in the field. She was a crime reporter, then court reporter, and then she went to City Hall.
Right.
And then she came back to the courts. And I'm like, Betsy, what are you doing here?
No story
She's
Tory.
like, No Story Tory. I'm back on courts.
Yeah,
It's
it
too
says, you know,
boring. After Rob Ford, it was just
one beer and
boring.
he's out. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No story Tory. So here is, and the washrooms over
Yeah,
there.
I'm gonna go. I'm
Okay.
gonna take advantage of this.
Let's listen to a couple of minutes, a great introduction to the Trauma Beat podcast, and then we'll get back to those subjects of the matter. Here we go.
Go get medicated.
Red lights on, it's recording.
Oh, this is for nearly 15 years
Okay, so why don't we start from the very beginning?
on a near daily basis.
Tamara Cherry at the Toronto Sun. How are you?
I was immersed in the business of bad news.
It ended up being a short story because he didn't end up dying.
Homicides, traffic fatalities,
What would you like people to know, I guess, about your son?
sexual violence, mass violence.
What was it about him that made you so afraid of him?
As a crime reporter in one of North America's largest markets,
What do you want me to call you? Because I'm going to change your name. Do you have any preference?
if it was a story that could make you cry,
So I'm so sorry to hear about your loss.
I probably covered it.
She would barely even whisper, you know? It's like she didn't even want to be heard.
From newspapers to television,
Reporting live at police headquarters, reporting live in North York, reporting live at the scene.
I thought I was only doing good.
I've had people that have contacted me saying, I want to help these victims.
But my research examining the impact of the media on trauma survivors
Now, do you have any pictures of your son that we might be able to?
and the impact of trauma on members of the media
We had a man walk up to our truck saying he hasn't been able to get a hold of his wife.
has shown me how wrong I was.
You said you were robbed at gunpoint at the Weston Prince, right?
Showing body bags and graphic video, reaching out to people just hours after they'd been hit by a tsunami of grief,
Down or? That's fine.
asking a trauma survivor to walk me through horrific, deeply personal details without really knowing how to ask those questions,
How much did they steal from you? What time was that at? Do you remember when this happened?
without really understanding the impact that not knowing could have.
Did he hang out with any friends that would get into that kind of trouble, that carried guns around?
And without understanding that in order to take care of myself over all those years, I had to take care of the people I was reporting on.
Take down your phone number just in case I'm listening back and I want to clarify anything.
I'm now on a mission to change the way these stories are collected and told.
How do we save them before they even get lured into this game?
The conversations in this podcast with people who have lived it, who are living it, who get it, are part of that mission.
I'm Tamara Cherry.
I'm Tamara Cherry.
I'm Tamara Cherry.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it. I know it's a really hard time.
And this is the Trauma Beat.
Okay, that's how I learned to say Tamara. By listening to
Jarring
you.
to listen to that. I haven't listened to that trailer in a long time.
So that's your
Happy that one.
podcast, right?
Yeah, that was, before I put out the first season last year.
Okay.
It's weird to hear those voice recordings, though, of myself. Even though I've listened to it a million times before, it's been a while.
And you're using, shout out to Siobhan Morris, you're using
Mm.
the reporter voice. This is, and I learned what the reporter voice is. It just means you're enunciating. Like I always felt like when people talk to me normally, they sounded different than they did when they were doing like a reporter
Are you talking about
voice.
right now I'm using the reporter voice?
No, in that trailer, I hear some of the, like when we hear clips of you reporting.
Am I really?
Yeah,
Oh,
even-
when I'm okay, because I didn't ever think I was one of the reporter voices. Oh, if you look over here, I just thought it's just Ken Shaw.
I'm Ken Shaw.
No, but I also don't want to use the podcaster voice. You know how like
Like Serial?
NPR? Yes.
Yeah, the serial voice.
So,
yeah.
I'm wondering.
I know.
Like, what are you? Come on, you hippie.
I agree with you 100%. Just be yourself, right? Like, can you
Yes.
imagine if I had another voice, I'd be using it, right?
Yes.
Like, you know what? Oh, he's two-faced. If I had
Yeah.
another face, I'd use that one. All right, so that's your podcast.
That said, I will say when you hear those like clips of me from my recorded interviews, that's like early in my career.
Right.
And something I just noticed listening back is my voice was higher then.
Sure.
And my voice is lower now. I've not been taking testosterone.
But that happens, I think, as you age.
No, but maybe it's that. But I also
I'm
think
told
it's.
at
I
some
think
point
it's
my
also probably because
voice will
people
change.
told me to lower my voice
Right.
because people prefer men's voices on television because men are to be trusted more and they're better journalists.
Well, that's unfair because now I have to sound like a man.
Yeah, I think you should start trying.
Start smoking.
Come on.
All right, so let me get some 101 here. Okay, so you mentioned you came to Toronto for a gig at the Toronto Star. Mm-hmm. Okay, what were you doing at the Star?
I started in the radio room. I had applied for one of their general assignment reporting internships, and I did the interview and everything. I had applied all over the place, and I got an interview for the Toronto Star GA internship, and actually, I don't want to tell this story, but
Oh, that's a good one right there.
No, okay, I will. I don't like using identifying information. I should have told you this before, like when it comes to certain homicides and everything like that.
But I'm not going to ask you any identifying information.
No, I was going to tell you though, like if people put two and two together on the timeline here, they'd know what case I'm talking about. But when I was interviewed for the Toronto Star, it was beginning of January 2005, and I had just gone on the birthright trip to Israel because my dad is Jewish, so I got to take the free trip to Israel. And I had just gotten back, and I'd been totally unplugged from the news for 2 weeks, and there had been a very high-profile homicide on Boxing Day 2005. Yep. And that was the first question that they asked me. Oh, what do you think of our coverage of this? I'm like, honestly, I just got off a plane. I have no idea what's been going on in the world. So I didn't get that, but they called me back like a month or so later. They're like, we don't have a spot for you in the GA, but we have a spot in the radio room if you'd be interested in that. I'm like, what's the radio room?
Right.
So the radio room basically is like, they referred to it, at least when I was there, as the box. It was like this windowless room in the middle of the newsroom. From what I understand now, they might have windows.
Well, they're no longer at 1 Yonge Street, first of all.
I know. It's so sad for me when I walk past 1 Yonge and I see like half of the building, the one side of the building has Toronto Star still on it. The other one, it's like you can just see the markings left behind, the ghost.
It is sad, right? Yeah.
It is sad. Anyway, so I started in the radio room, which is basically like it's a around the clock job where they have like an 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., 4 p.m. to midnight, and midnight to 8 a.m. shift. And you are just doing all of your reporting from inside the box, and you're listening to police, fire, ambulance scanners. You are you're watching CP24 on TV, listening to 680 News. You are calling the staff sergeants and the fire captains and calling through buildings and doing all of the reporting on breaking news from inside. And you're writing obituaries and doing other things, writing for the paper and the web. So that's where I started at the Toronto Star. And then I eventually was let out of the box. And the following summer, I was going to be a GA reporter, and then one of their crime reporters
what does GA stand for?
General assignment.
Okay.
Look at me throwing out an acronym that you don't know.
Well, I've never, unlike you, I've never worked for a mainstream media.
I know, but you talk to media people like all the time.
But GA, I think about Old Exhibition Stadium and when I got the $2 seat at Dominion and I got to sit in general admission.
Okay.
It's
like, FOTM, flavor of the month.
Flavor of the month. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you're more than that. Okay. So but you end up at the Sun, right? So
yes.
So
I was on like 4 back-to-back contracts at the Star. It literally got to the point, like I said, so I was the 4-month internship and then 8-month and then summer, so another 4 months, and then they extended it by a month. I was actually interesting thing. I don't think I talked about this in the book, but it was basically down to like, because I applied for like the year-long internship then at the Star, which is very prestigious.
Right.
And it from what I understood at the time, it was basically down to like me or Robin Doolittle for this like one spot. And we're like 2 white women. They can't have like more than one white woman who's whatever. That sounds awful. No, but it was like true. We knew it was going to be one or the other because we both kind of checked all the same boxes.
Right.
And I remember there was like a camp in the newsroom that was like really behind me, and these are like some of the old school reporters, and they really loved me because I was like gruff and all that stuff, and then obviously there would have been people behind Robin because she was a pit bull and
a hell of a figure skater.
Yes, yeah. Has she been on here? She talked about
what? No, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would love to have her on, but I have not yet.
She's got some stories to tell, but she just puts them in books and she sells them well.
Well, I think she does guard her stories. Like, I feel like she's... But maybe one day she will
I did too. I never thought that I would speak publicly about... Like, I'm a very private person, which people are surprised to hear, but I actually am. Anyway, and I remember getting the call. I was at a Blue Jays game, and I had been waiting for this call. Am I going to get this year thing? Am I going to get this year thing? And I got the call, and I don't remember who it was, probably the city editor at the time, and like, Tamara, you didn't get it, or whatever it was. And I remember my heart just sinking.
Right.
But then they extended me for 1 more month. So
okay.
4th contract. And then from what I understood, the union basically told them, you got to either fire her or hire her. We can't this is such precarious work. This is ridiculous.
Right.
So that's when I went to the Sun. I got a full-time job at the Sun.
Okay, you got a full-time job at the Sun. What were you doing at the Toronto Sun?
So at the Sun, I was initially hired as a GA. What does it mean?
It means general assignment.
Yes, general
Everybody
assignment
knows
reporter.
that, Tamara.
So that was in I think I started with them in November 2007. And within a couple months of me arriving there, Jonathan Jenkins, he was one of their 3 crime reporters at the time. He went to work at Queen's Park. So a spot opened up on the crime desk and I said, I want to pick me. And they interviewed me for it. It was me, 3 people interviewing me. And it was so funny because it was so formal. And I'm saying why I should be one of the 3 crime reporters. And this is why, blah, blah, blah. And I remember Kevin Han, who was the city editor at the time, him just shuffling his papers. Yeah, you got it. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you got it.
Wow.
And it was a very prestigious post there because when you're a Toronto Sun crime reporter, you get I don't remember if I had a car or no, that you get a vehicle allowance, you get a gas card, which was very sought after. You have a scanner in your car, and Kevin Han used to sleep with the scanner next to his bed, and I didn't do that, but it was
okay. But crime, now that you're on the Toronto Sun crime desk, are you aware that you're going to experience trauma, other people's trauma? Do you have any idea? This isn't the firefighters rescued this dog out of a tree. What a nice moment for little Molly. Got her dog back or whatever. Is Molly the name of the dog or the owner of the dog?
It's the drug that the owner of the dog took.
Yeah.
And then put the dog in the tree.
I just heard an anecdote about the chemist who invented Molly. But I digress. Okay, so
what's the anecdote?
I can't remember the anecdote now, except that it was.
So you have short-term memory issues. You just heard it.
I did just hear it on a bike ride recently, and I feel the anecdote had to do with the fact that he was working on pesticides. He was working on pesticides, and then he accidentally
ingested
what became known as Molly. Okay, MDMA, I think.
MDMA.
Right, you know your stuff because you're the reporter here.
Yes.
Okay, now Sun Crime Desk. You're doing that until, do you leave the Sun crime desk for CTV News?
Yes, I felt so guilty. So,
but what made you told me earlier in this conversation that you never thought of yourself on television. Well, did you know CTV News is the most watched Toronto news?
I know. Wasn't interested. So this is I when I was in journalism school, I took the absolute bare minimum broadcast courses, whatever I had to do to graduate. Because I'm I'm never going to be on TV. Not interested. I'm a writer. That's what I wanted to do. But the Toronto Sun, as you might have heard, the media industry experiences some layoffs. So the Toronto Sun,
I heard about this.
I always felt like it was a game of Jenga. I've said this many times over the years, where it's you never know what block they're going to remove when the whole thing comes crumbling down. It is actually miraculous that paper still exists. It is. I know you've had some of the recent departures on, Rita DeMontis and Jane Stevenson and Liz Braun.
Right.
And it's who's writing this paper? And I understand how the whole post-media chain works. But when I was at the Toronto Sun, it was so miserable by the time I left that I would pull into the parking lot and I would feel my anxiety rising, and I just had to steel myself to walk inside, and I would get to the border of the newsroom, and Pam Davies, who is their artist, and I knew her, she was a good friend of mine because she was also their sketch artist in court. She was on the outermost perimeter of the newsroom, and I'd stop and I'd chat with her, and then I would just be walking into the newsroom and thinking, what shit are they going to throw at me today? Because I wanted to go there and do good journalism, and there'd be so many times that I'd walk in, I'd be like, I've got a great scoop on this. They'd be like, okay, well, you're one of 2 reporters working today, so we actually need you to write half the paper. So no time for real interviews.
And you dropped those names, the trifecta, those women, and I think Jane is still there. I feel like Jane Stevenson still writes for the Sun.
Oh, is she? Oh, yeah. Then she's basically on her own.
She's doing. I think she is the entertainment section now. Actually, Jane Stevenson.
She does everything.
Right.
So anyway, I
were you friendly with the sports people? Because most of my Toronto Sun guests happen to be the sports people.
I didn't know. I didn't have any. I don't text with them or anything.
You can't take a text right now from Steve Simmons.
I was always friendly with everybody, though. The Toronto Sun newsroom was a fantastic place. Just again, like a family. But the shit falls down in these organizations, and when you're only given this many resources, then it's like, that said, what I will say about the Sun is I got to do amazing work there on human trafficking because I started reporting on human trafficking. Toronto Police, when they laid their first ever human trafficking charge in January 2008, I happened to be working that weekend when the news release came over the fax machine, and I got onto that and I grabbed onto it and I reported on it for years. And the Toronto Sun, because we were so short-staffed, Dave Ellis, rest in peace, and Jonathan Jenkins, rest in peace, but Dave Ellis...
We say shout out to Ridley Funeral Home.
There you go. But Dave Ellis would walk over to me on a Wednesday. He'd come to the cop desk. Hey, Tamara, you have anything, a spread that we can do for the weekend? I'm like, Dave, a spread? I need time to do this. He's like, we're looking for a 2-page spread for the weekend. I'm like, and I'm writing tomorrow's paper and the next day and the next day. So as a result, I was able to basically write whatever the hell I wanted. So I did a lot of work on human trafficking, and they would just be like, have as much space as you want. And it was amazing. I would have all these 2-page spreads.
Wow.
But by the time I left, it was just so, the morale was so low because we had no resources. And as you may or may not have read in my book, maybe you're setting up a story you already know, I was covering a homicide, a very high-profile homicide in the GTA at the time, and I had my little tiny, because at that point the Toronto Sun had us like shooting video and doing like little stand-ups, and we had one of those like giant lav mics that we would like attach to ourselves, and with these tiny little
video.
cameras.
We all remember the pivot to video.
Yeah, so it was painful, and I remember standing on the side of this dirt road, and that where a body had been discovered of presumably this victim in this high profile case we'd all been covering, standing on the side of this dirt rural road just outside of Toronto. And I was chatting with Austin Delaney, and he said, Jim Junkin just announced his retirement. Like, what? JJ, who I knew well from working the crime beat, loved working with the guy, said, we need another crime reporter. You come work with us. Come work for us. I'm like,
Delaney.
No, Austin, you'll never catch me dead in front of a camera. He's like, you're already doing it. And he gestured to my tiny little tripod and tiny little camera.
He's right.
Like, come do it right. Yeah. And this light bulb went off my head, but I was still so hesitant that as somebody with undiagnosed ADHD, this is something I probably would have usually started I held on to that for 2 weeks. I did not say anything to anybody about it. I just sat with it. And then I reached out and I talked to my husband and my sister, and I reached out to Austin and I said, okay, make the intro. And then like the following week, I think I was having coffee with Paul Rogers and Steve Kassar, who were like running the station at the time. And then it was basically just they had to go through the process. And then that December, I was home for Christmas in Regina, and I got the call. And because at that point I was considering either leaving journalism altogether or moving to Calgary, because I'd worked at the Calgary Herald briefly years earlier, and they had, one of the big wigs there had kept in touch with me and always said, we have a job for you back here if you ever want to come back. Or just, I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I said, okay, I'm just going to take this leap of faith. What do I have to lose? And I ended up loving it. I loved writing for TV.
Well, okay, shout out to FOTM Austin Delaney.
Love him.
Recently made his Toronto Mike debut, and I recommend it to everybody. So you did listen to Austin Delaney on Toronto Mike. Yeah. He was great. And good on him. He was 100% right. The pivot to video, you were already doing it.
Yeah, because he was a radio guy.
So come on over and do it right.
Yeah.
So now you're comfortable with being on television.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I wouldn't say I was comfortable with being on television. You kidding me?
Well, baptism by fire here.
It was literally baptism by fire. And I never actually ever got real training for television. I still don't know what some of the TV speak means. People are like, sot vos sots. I'm like, what do you want me to do?
And look at you judging me
Am
for
I
not knowing what
something?
GA means.
I know, right?
Okay, how dare you? What a hypocrite we have here.
I thought I was judging you silently. I didn't know that came out.
You forgot I was recording.
Yes.
Okay, so now we have you at CTV News. Last question about Toronto Sun before we leave the Toronto Sun behind is, what kind of guy is Joe Warmington?
God. That's not a question I was expecting.
Well,
Joe
I don't want to give you all the
Warmington,
predictable
so working with Joe, and I think Joe, if he's listening to this, he's got to...
He listens. I get notes from Joe. Joe listens.
Joe is always listening.
I've invited him on, by the way.
Same as he won't come on?
He politely declined the invitation
interesting.
to come on. Yeah.
So Joe is... The annoying thing about Joe, and Joe, you got to admit this is true. He would always... I'd be sitting in the cop desk at the Toronto Sun, and he'd come in, hey, Cherry, what are you working on today? Like, Joe, you're not stealing my story. Because I'd be working on something, but then if Joe wanted to do it, well, then Joe would get it because he's the night scrawler and he's the columnist and everything. Be like, Joe, back off. You're not taking this. No, just, what are you doing, So I'm going to leave it at that for Joe.
Okay.
I don't agree with some of the stuff that he says. He does some good work, but some of the stuff I don't agree with that he writes about.
Okay, I think you were diplomatic there. Okay, so now you're at CTV News. Now you're going to be covering, and I noticed, I have a question actually, just because you've made a decision for a couple of high profile cases not to name anyone involved in the case. But both instances are very high profile cases where we all know the names of the victims in these cases. So I'm just curious.
You know why I don't name them.
Well, that's why this is where you're going to explain to us all why you're not naming, and I won't say it because I'm trying to respect you, but I'm not saying these names. But when you talk about for example, the Boxing Day murder by the Eden Center, and you don't name anybody, I'm curious why. Let's tell the people.
So two reasons. Well, probably multiple reasons, but the two that come to my mind first. First, because I don't want to surprise that family. They're not expecting their case to be suddenly back in the media. And if one of them's listening to this and then suddenly, I know how that can activate trauma responses. And I know how lots of trauma survivors can feel like they're basically being talked about behind their back, where their stories are being discussed and it is their experience, their story. And so many times we have total control over these stories and it's their experiences. So there's that. But then I will also point out that the reason I'm in Toronto this time was actually to spend time with a homicide survivor whose son, and this is something I discuss briefly in my book. People wouldn't necessarily know it, although she was episode 1 of season 2 of the Trauma Beat. This is a woman who, her son was a young black man who was murdered in what I would say is like a high crime area in Lawrence Heights, where I had covered many other homicides before, and he was murdered. And I didn't know what happened to him or his name or anything until about 11 months after the fact, when then Staff Inspector Greg McLean of the Homicide Squad gathered us all in Toronto Police Headquarters Media Gallery to have this big flashy news conference and to announce that her son, Marvin Engelbrecht, and I'm comfortable naming him because I've talked to her family and his family about this, and they're happy for me to speak his name as much as I want. Marvin Engelbrecht had been murdered in a, quote, random act of violence, along with a number of other people who had been shot in these, quote, random acts of violence. And I remember thinking, like, it's one of those flashbulb memories, Mike, where I'm sitting on this carpeted floor of Toronto Police Headquarters Media Gallery, typing into my iPad and shaking my head and being like, Marvin Engelbrecht, how do I not know this name? This guy was shot at random. He had been out walking his dog, and the allegations were that this car pulled up and these guys got out of the car and chased him up a driveway and murdered him, and apparently at random. And so I remember emailing Christine Eakins, who was the CTV librarian at the time, and asking her to tell me what sort of viz do we have, video on the Marvin Engelbrecht murder, and she wrote back, no viz. Or I called her and she told me no viz, because that's what I typed into my notes at the time. And I held on to that like shame for years of how did I not know who he was? But the other victim you're referring to, everybody knows, it's a household name. And that is actually something, we talk about it in that podcast episode with Simone Engelbrecht, without naming that other victim, that at one point she went to like a community meeting and all of these in Lawrence Heights and all of these politicians and everything showing up, and she's like, everybody knows the name of such and such. Right. Nobody knows my son's name. Why isn't anybody talking about this? And that's a problem in this city. So there's certain cases we talk about, and there's so many other survivors out there who are like, and why aren't you talking about my case?
Reading between the lines, possibly this was a
young white person
girl
who was murdered versus
a
young black, in a not a place where you would expect gun violence, but it's like there's this.
That's a good point.
There's this nonprofit that I work with in Philadelphia called the Philadelphia Center for Gun Violence Reporting, and they're trying to change the way that gun violence is reported. They want it reported through a public health lens versus the lens that it currently is, and I would say that the lens that we use up here in Canada too, where we present gun violence in certain neighborhoods as something that is inevitable rather than what it actually is, which is preventable. We don't talk about solutions. We don't talk about prevention. It's just like, unfortunately, if you live in these neighborhoods, this is something you are going to experience. And so people there grow up thinking, well, I'm going to just grow up hearing gunshots at nighttime. I'm going to grow up, I'm not going to be able to let my kids out on a sunny day because I don't want them to be hit by a bullet. And I've heard this from people in many neighborhoods in the city over the years, and it's awful. But actually, gun violence isn't inevitable. It's preventable. And I think if we started reporting on it in a different way, then maybe that could actually impact it. But where that young white girl was murdered, and this is the thing, I don't want to cause her family further harm by saying that she shouldn't have gotten the attention that she did, because I don't want to take away from their trauma, their very real trauma. But there are families who are suffering all over the city. And unfortunately, we don't recognize the pain of them in the same way because their child was Black or murdered in a neighborhood where many people are murdered. And whether it was a random act of violence with like Marvin Engelbrecht or a targeted shooting like some other homicides I talk about in my book, it doesn't matter. It's the same pain that is left behind with these families. And can I tell you something actually interesting that I learned from a homicide investigator? I love interesting things. I was meeting with a homicide investigator the day before yesterday after I flew in. And this investigator told me that I don't know if it's Toronto or in Ontario, homicide victims, their families are entitled to $5,000 to help cover funeral costs unless they were involved in a criminal activity when they were murdered. So, for example, if there is a young man it seems that he was dealing drugs when he was murdered, it was a drug deal gone wrong. Sorry, family. From this impoverished neighborhood, you don't get your $5,000. But if we think that he was an innocent victim, quote unquote, here's your $5,000. How awful is that? And so homicide investigators, they try to find a way to word it in a way, because lots of times you don't know in the initial stages of an investigation unless there's a gun found on the victim. But it's the same pain that's left behind. Right. But as a society, we're giving $5,000 to, as long as you raised a law-abiding son, and we're not giving $5,000 to that single mother who was working 3 minimum wage jobs and so didn't know who her son was hanging out with, and he ended up running with gangs and getting shot. She needs to figure out another way. And she's the one that gets the gravesite. I've seen many of these with no tombstone because she can't afford it.
Okay, well said. Okay, now we're cooking here. Now, I've noticed... You
got me all worked up. No, I was looking forward to talking about light things.
No. Well, we were eventually going to get to the T word, trauma, and here we are now. Okay, so you're at CTV News, and as a member of CTV News, you're covering like police and crime beat. I just had on... I say just, and it's probably last summer now that I think about it, but Steve Ryan came over. Doesn't live too far from here. And Steve Ryan, we were talking about what he's seen, because he was a homicide detective with TPS before he moved over to the media side. And we talked about, what he's seen and how does he deal with it, right? And it's like, yeah, he works out and listens to Air Supply. Like this is sort of his coping mechanism or whatever. But that man has seen some shit. But you covering... For was it 15? I don't know how many years.
Over 15 years.
Yeah, almost 15 years. You're a crime reporter in the Big Smoke, Canada's biggest city here.
Toronto.
Toronto. I'm going to learn how to say that at some point.
Wendy Gillis, actually, the crime reporter for Toronto Star. Yeah. She's a good friend of mine. She's from Saskatchewan. Shout out. She's from Saskatoon. Wendy Gillis, love her. I think I think her Twitter bio is something like a Saskatchewanian who knows how to say Trana, T''RANNA.
Toronto rhymes with trauma. I figured it out. Trauma. Trauma. Okay. So one day, but and I was born in Parkdale. You can check the records.
There you go.
So you've seen some shit. So I kind of want to get you going again about how trauma and the media intersect, and this kind of ties to your book, The Trauma Beat.
Just a little bit.
For rethinking the business of, because I got to read everything after the colon. The Trauma Beat, a case for rethinking the business of bad news. So. Oh gosh. So maybe share a little bit. Should we maybe get this out of the way? I feel like at some point I'm going to need why did you leave CTV News Toronto and then end up back in Regina? So maybe we get you out of CTV News and then we talk about your crime reporting as a whole here. But relevant. What caused you to leave CTV News Toronto and in fact also leave the city we're talking in right now, Toronto?
Okay, so I did not leave CTV because I was burnt out or traumatized or anything like that. That I'll say number one. So this is a bit of a convoluted story, so bear with me here. Number one reason I left, I wanted to be home for dinner with my kids. How many kids do you have?
3.
Okay, that's a lot of kids.
I know. I was going to say that's something we have in common. We both have millions of children.
Three.
That's at least how it felt.
Three children, and are you comfortable giving ages of these children?
Yep. I never talk about their names on air or anything like that,
just
but
need ages.
they're
Okay.
almost 6, almost 8, and almost 10.
Okay, so I have an 8 and a 10.
I know.
So we do have a lot in
So
common. there.
cute. I love the ages. It's just the best. So I wanted to be home for dinner with my kids, and I knew that as they got older, like I'm never going to be able to go to the soccer games. I'm never going to be able to do this. And as the crime reporter, they always at CTV, they always wanted you live at 6. And I was often, live at 6. And the reason we lived out in Ajax by the time after my first was born, we moved out to Ajax because I found a place. I'm like, where do I never report as a crime reporter? And I found this neighborhood in Ajax, and I called the local police station. I asked all these questions, and we lived there. But as a result, it often took
So
me
you were looking for a low crime neighborhood.
Exactly.
So
Absolutely.
you're talking to cops to find a low crime
For
neighborhood.
sure. Yeah. And I'm thinking, where do I not go? Where do I not report as a crime reporter? So lots of CTV folks live out in Durham region, but that's because CTV's in Agincourt. And
Right. The other
anyway,
side of the city.
Yeah, but I was never, anyway, I was often driving home, and I usually wouldn't get home until like 7:30, even 8 o'clock at night. And my husband would be like trying to keep our kids, like for example, after I went back after my first mat leave, trying to keep him awake so I could see him. And there were so many times I was on the 401 and just had tears coming down my cheeks, watching the clock, knowing he's going to be going to sleep. I'm missing dinner. I'm missing this. I loved my job though, but I loved my family more. And I don't really like to say that because it makes it sound like people that stay in TV don't love their families. That's not it. But for me, I wanted to be there. So that was number one. So then I started thinking about, okay, well, what would I do next? And the obvious answer to that for many journalists, I'm taking off this coat. I'm sweating.
Look, Tamara's getting serious.
I'm getting,
Look at that.
I'm pulling up my sleeves.
You got a license for those guns? What's going on here?
I was fishing for that. Anyway, so I...
Shout out to Dana Levinson.
Yeah. Oh my God. The triceps on that woman and the biceps.
But she puts in the work.
Oh, she does. But it's crazy. Like, Dana, are you just eating like plain chicken breasts all the time?
But it's interesting to make me brought up Dana
ripped.
because I'm very close to Dana. But there is also
you produce her podcast.
Yeah,
don't you?
and we're good friends. And her husband has the same birthday as me.
Oh.
But she this comes from a trauma as well. Like her marriage ends, and from this experience and this trauma, she basically channels it into getting strong so nobody can hurt her again. And that's when the Dana is born, which is...
Did she talk about that on the podcast?
She talks about this. I've
talked to her about it too. It is amazing. That woman is ripped, and I love to see a strong woman. I love to see that definition in the arms.
And I saw her, and again, we're going to get right back to this very serious topic, but you mentioned the Edmonton Oilers when you arrived, and it was not recorded, but my wife is from Edmonton, and we were watching Game 4 last night. During the telecast, Dana's on my TV because she does these Capital Direct ads, and I see.
Capital Direct.
Like, oh, there's Dana. You got it. There you go. There's the jingle. I'm more of a Pizza Nova jingle man myself.
Yeah.
Shout out to FOTM Elfie Zappacosta. Yes. But I'm seeing Dana, and just to put a bow on the Edmonton Oilers thing. They're at home, and you're not down in a series till you lose at home, but they are down 2-0, and they're at home. And everyone's excited. Monica and other Edmontonians and people who like the Oilers are very excited.
My brother.
But we kind of tuned out at 4-1. So at 4-1, we just said,
depressing.
We went on with our lives. And then I wake up and I saw with 5 minutes left, that game is 4-3. Like Edmonton scores 2 goals in the third period.
Exciting
and
game.
for 5 minutes to tie that up, I'm kind of, it's better to kind of find, but that was a comeback, didn't culminate, and now put a fork in that team. They're done. But you're rooting for the Oilers.
I have to. My brother's like the biggest. My brother is just always been the biggest Oilers fan. And fun fact, actually, my cousin played for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Luke Shen and Braden Shen are my cousins.
Well, that's more than a fun fact. That's a fucking great fact. Luke Shen was a beloved.
I know he was
Leaf.
when he first came
and
here.
He had a second tour
and then
duty.
he came back. I know, amazing as the old geezer.
Everyone loved Luke.
So young. Yes.
And his brother. The story, the famous
Braden.
story at the time was that I think it was Brian Burke. I think it was, but basically. The intent was to draft Braden Shen, and I think the Flyers or somebody kind of screwed over Brian Burke, which people like to do for some good reasons. But basically, the intent was to have Luke and Braden sort of like how he drafted the twins, the Seddon twins. Seddon?
I don't know.
Seddon? I think it's Seddon. The Seddon twins in Vancouver. Like the idea was to have Braden and Luke on the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I didn't know that. See,
yeah.
I'm not in the loop on anything, even in my family. I just love the family. Shout out to the Shens. But anyway, okay. Can I just say one other thing about a jingle? Because you said
da-da-da-da-da.ca.
I
know what you're going to say, right? You're going to say fabric land.
No, the one that I always think about in Regina. So in Saskatchewan, I don't think we have this restaurant here, but there's Brown Social House, a great restaurant in Regina. Lots of gluten-free options there for all you celiacs.
It's worth the drive.
Yes. But whenever I'd go back to Regina or my family would be talking about, we're going to Brown's, I'd say, Brown's, a short man's world of fashion, because it fits. And every time we go to Brown's, which we do often, I'm like, because it fits. And nobody in Regina gets the reference. But
I'm not even going to tell you that I actually don't know that reference. So,
what?
So that tells
Brown's,
you.
a short man's world of fashion. It's in Toronto because it fits.
But
it's the best.
To me, it's all about eras. Like I stopped listening to radio basically. So the only radio I ever listen to now is CBC
fiend.
Radio, and there's no jingles on CBC Radio.
Yeah.
So it's like all my references are from the 80s and 90s basically.
Yeah. Because it fits. There's lots of people listening who will get that.
Although
reference.
the Capital Direct one I know because it's on TV, but I only watch live sports with ads. So it has to be.
Capital Direct is on CP24, right? I think.
Oh, for sure. Because that's Dana's. That's got to be there for Dana.
Yes. Anyway, I don't remember what we were talking about.
But Fabric Land is we're talking about great jingles. That's why we're here today. And
this isn't a tangent. This is the actual topic.
Right. But shout out to, seriously, he lives in Edmonton, Alberta. So we're wrapping up the Oilers and we're coming back to your trauma here.
Right.
But the Oiler, to put the bow on it, is that put a fork in them, they're done. Proud Edmontonian, because he moved from Toronto to Edmonton many, many years ago. Alfie Zappacosta. His Oilers are done, but that Pizza Nova jingle will live forever in our hearts and our minds. 431 Pizza Nova.
Yeah.
I'd sing it, but he would sue me. Okay, so back to you, Tamara Cherry. Here we are now. Okay, so the trauma beat, a case for rethinking the business of bad news. Maybe give it.
I was telling you why.
Why you left?
Right?
That's the longest fucking answer to that question.
Did they run you out of town? So anyway, I remember having a conversation.
Did they fire you? That's the question. Okay.
Yeah. So it's actually funny because you could say yes and no to that. But I remember talking to a homicide investigator saying, "What am I going to do next? I don't want to go into PR and be like speaking for a company I don't believe in." And he said to me, I remember exactly where we were standing at like a bay and whatever the street is just north of college and outside of police headquarters, outside my live track. He said, what about doing PR for victims? And I was like, yes. I mean, nobody's there for them. And this light bulb went on. And I thought about it for many years and not many years. I mean, that was in 2016. And then or even 2015, I don't know. And then I went on mat leave again in November 2016, and I had a whole bunch of meetings and blah, 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 blah. And anyway, long story short, that wasn't really happening. And then when I was on mat leave with my third, I get an email in 2019. In the spring of 2019, I get an email from a friend of mine at CTV saying, holy shit, look at this. And because he knew that I had been wanting out, even though I loved my job. And it was basically saying that they are offering packages because there were like 12 journalists at CTV at the time, and they were going to be replacing us with 12 video journalists. So it was basically Dana left at the same time as I did.
Right.
Same way, same reasons. So
basically it was an opportunity to leave but get severed.
They didn't want to. They wanted us. They wanted all of us journalists to become video journalists. And I went back and I already knew I wanted to leave, but I'm like, I'm going to give this a shot so at least I can get my severance. And I did the training on video training. And honestly, so when I told them I was leaving, and this kind of went down from what I understand, like CTV folklore, where I went in and I told them, thanks, no thanks. I'm not taking the VJ job. Give me my money. I'm out of here. Show me the money. And it turned into like a 2.5 hour conversation, them trying to get me to stay and me giving them all the reasons why what they were doing was a really shitty thing for journalism. And how me having to go
Pickup Communications, which is the public relations firm that you started that supports trauma survivors and the stakeholders who surround them. They were trying to tell you that was bad for journalism?
No. I hadn't told them that. No, I was telling them that them making all of us video journalists was bad for journalism because when I'm in there editing my stories and all this stuff, I'm not knocking on doors. I'm not having thoughtful conversations with survivors. When I was doing my video training, one of the last stories I did was going out and interviewing this trauma survivor survivor. Her son had just been murdered, I think 1 month earlier. And I was interviewing her and I'm like, oh, just a second, I got to do this. And and I couldn't have that real connection. And it was awful.
Right.
And I said, see you later. You have people like, now I can say this, Austin's gone. Austin Delaney's going to be shooting his own stuff and editing it. He's one of the most amazing writers and storytellers. Just give him a frigging camera person. Right. And I think he did have one to the end. But it was just, they were just trying to do more and more with less. And I'm like, this is not the kind of journalism I want to be doing.
And for you to focus on your craft, and you're very good at it, and to do it proper, to serve it, give it the time it requires. You can't, it's like, sort of like me. Imagine how good a host I'd be if somebody were, I had a VP of sales or something handling that part or whatever,
my God.
right? Can you imagine if I had a VP of sales?
I feel the same way.
Right.
I do everything.
Right.
I'm a one-woman show. People are like,
you and I are not Bell Media. Like, that's the difference,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Bell Media, and again...
Which is a fabulous thing.
Which is and I know how the budgets work. You can't take money from the fucking cable thing and throw it at TV or whatever. But if you go up higher in the chain and you're at BCE Inc. or whatever...
Yeah.
We're talking trillions. What's the word after trillions? Like, we're talking...
Because my kids would say gazillions and millions.
Okay. So we're talking real money. So this whole idea, like, we're going to cut some costs on the local news by making Tamara do her own video work, and you got to do everything, right? As a journalist, that is offensive. Like, because now you need to have all these other things you got to do that
when
are
you're going
not
into
a
home of a
work.
person whose son was just murdered, and it's already intrusive enough when I'm going in there with a camera person and I'm like, and I'm trying to explain to him, this is why he's setting up this light, and this is, he's doing a white balance.
These are people who just experienced trauma.
And you're trying to be as invisible as possible. And when I'm there and God forbid, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. We have to do this whole thing over again. Because I just realized I was recording you in blue.
You know what broke my heart in your book? When I hear about, okay, so you're on the sidewalk. Let's say somebody's son was just, unnamed woman's son was just murdered brutally or whatever. And then maybe she's on the porch. And I'm going to just pick names I know. But let's say, although I don't know if anyone's left at Global News anymore. But let's say Global News is there. Mm-hmm. And they're talking, and this woman's telling the story of her son or whatever. And then it's like, okay, next in comes City TV, right? The Rogers company, right? And then waiting in the wings there is Tamara, who represents, Bell Media or whatever. You're going to come in and get the CTV, and maybe CP24 uses it. I don't know what you guys do over there, but okay. But bottom line is...
CP24, News Talk 1010.
Yeah, right.
Well, CTV News Channel, CTV National.
So essentially, this poor mother who just experienced the greatest trauma of her life, okay? And again, she has the right, of course, to shut her fucking door and say, I'm not talking to anybody.
Nobody's telling her that, except for maybe the homicide
she's at her most,
she doesn't know.
She's at her most vulnerable. And one by one, and again, you're human beings and you're as respectful as possible, but you have a job to do. You need footage for the 6 o'clock news, and you want footage of the woman talking about her son. He was a good boy, whatever. To me, it's like retell that story over and over again.
Yes.
It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, speak to that. Like, there's got to be a better way.
Exactly. Did you just quote my book? I thought there has to be a better way. Yes, and what you're describing is exactly how it happens. And quite often how it happens is we actually go and knock on the door and they say, no, I'm sorry. We can't. And then our desk tells us, just go back and try one more time. Can you just try again? And they go back and they say, no, I'm sorry. And then they're like, just stick around in case they talk to someone else. So then you see City News go up and it's like, well, I got to go up and put my microphone in there in case they start talking.
Once one gets in there and it's like, you can't have this person on City TV and not on CTV News.
And then it gets to the point, there's so many of us outside the door and we just say, and honestly, we have the best of intentions. If I have this grieving mother on TV, then maybe somebody will call in a tip to Crime Stoppers. We say these things to ourselves, but really it's such bullshit.
But how much of it is, yes, best of intentions? I'm not so sure about that, because I think at the end of the day, somebody who's asking for all this is thinking about viewership.
No, we're not.
Like
no, people in the field don't think about that shit.
Some people not in the field.
Do, but
somebody higher in the chain who's telling you go back and try again.
See, people always think that like the gods of Bell Media are coming down and being like, do it this way. That doesn't happen. But yes, because in the news business, we are like, you got to get it first, you gotta, get the best story, whatever. And it's just, we do things in a certain way because it's the way it's always been done. And a lot of times the people who are making these decisions in the office are not the people who have ever been knocking on that door ever. And I'm not just speaking about CTV, I'm talking about like everywhere. And there's a real disconnect quite often between the people in the field who have the best hearts, mostly, not all. There's certain people that I wouldn't send my grieving loved ones to, but they care so much. And we are struggling, especially when you're a young reporter, you're so vulnerable because remember how many contracts was I on in the span of less than a year and a half at the Star? 4.
Right, 4.
Such precarious work, and they're telling you, go, try again, and then you are celebrated when you're able to get that quote unquote scoop or whatever. And it's just, and so you tell yourself, well, this is, people need to know. And I do believe that I want to create empathy. I wanted the mother in Rosedale to feel for the mother in Rexdale and to empathize. And so she could go to her MP or her local city councilor and be like, what are you doing about gun violence in this city? You know, I wanted that, but I was actually causing harm. And the research project that I did, I know we haven't talked about, we don't need to get totally into it.
We can get into it now. But
so,
because I do have questions.
I launched my company, Pickup Communications, to be a PR firm that supports trauma survivors with the media. Mm-hmm. I was very fortunate to be launching my company right before a global pandemic. So all of the meetings, like my business model at the time was basically like, I want to be hired as a consultant, because this is after consulting with many different people in law enforcement, victim services. This is how people told me I should do it. You need to be hired as a consultant by police services to support the survivors attached to their cases. So I had all these meetings with these police services around the GTA, and then everything came to a halt because the pandemic happened. So then I said, okay, I'm going to check something off my long list of things that I've wanted to do, which was something that an academic friend of mine had suggested, which was do a research project examining the impact of the media on trauma survivors so that I could take something and show, look, there's harm, there's a need for this, there's a huge gap in victim services. And it culminated in basically, it kept expanding. And at the end of the day, I surveyed or interviewed more than 100 trauma survivors from across Canada and the United States, survivors of homicide, traffic fatality, sexual violence, mass violence. And I ended up surveying or interviewing more than 24 journalists from across Canada and the United States who cover trauma. And what I found was, yes, not only is there a glaring gap in victim services, but the very, basic things that I did as a crime reporter to tell the story were very often very harmful for the people that I was reporting on. And quite often, I think I was causing more harm than good, and my very good intentions were not good enough. And not only that, I was fucking up my own self in the process.
Right.
Which I didn't realize really at the time. I can reflect back and see how things were bubbling up, like something I talk about in my book. When I was researching my book, I went and I'm like, oh, I kept a diary at some point. And I went and I found it, and I found these entries from 2006 to 2007, 2008. So the beginning of my Toronto journalism career. And there were signs that shit was not right, where I'm like, why? Like,
well, can I ask you some pointed questions about this? Okay,
for sure,
so
yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious. Kind of an opening question, then some specifics here. By the way, on the live stream, they're telling me this Browns jingle.
Because it fits.
A Hamilton. Apparently, that's a Hamilton store, which
there was a store in Toronto, wasn't there? Because I've seen it. Unless I was covering a story in Hamilton.
I hadn't been in there.
And
somebody says it's now called Robbie Brown Clothing, but there's someone T
Do
Hill.
they still say because
T Hill
it fits?
Tim Hare is wondering if it's if it's in Hamilton. But okay, this is
for some reason I feel like it was like on the down for it.
Oh, and
but maybe
the
I'm
twins
wrong.
in Vancouver, who are both in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So I'm sorry, that tells you how much I love the Canucks. Sedin twins. Okay.
Oh, Matt Sundin.
No,
that's not a.
But all from Sweden, of course.
Right,
but,
okay.
Sedin twins, not the Sundin,
yes.
the great Matt Sundin here.
Yeah.
Okay, so goal scored by number 13, Matt Sundin. That's my FOTM Andy Frost here. So my question again, okay, so I'm curious about the responsibility you have as a member of our news media. Like where does this responsibility end? So you go to the porch, you talk to the woman who is distraught in trauma, as vulnerable as she'll ever be, talking about maybe her son was murdered, and now you got your footage, you thank her, you walk away. Is that the end of your responsibility, Tamara Cherry? And when I say yours, I mean almost like the CTV News,
Is this
Toronto,
are you asking
Bell
what
Media.
I thought then, or
well,
what
tell
I
me
think
both
now?
then. I'm curious if it evolves.
So back then, I mean, we would tell ourselves that, like in our guts, we knew, I think most of us knew what we were doing was wrong, because there was this chipping away of our soul that would happen every time we'd knock on their door again after they told us no and everything like that. But we would tell ourselves, well, we didn't cause this. This is just a shitty This is one of the shitty parts of a shitty situation. We didn't fire that gun. We didn't drive drunk. We weren't driving distracted. It wasn't us that caused this. It was the freaking murderer, the drunk driver, or whatever. Right. We are just part of that. So we're not adding to it. This is just it. This is part of the awful package.
Right.
So what responsibility did I have when I left? After that, I would say to get it right, to get the story right, to do a good job, But actually what I've learned now is so much more. I should have
Tell me about that, because I feel like you'll speak to this. This is your expertise here. But there's two things going on here. There's the members of the media who are going to experience trauma covering such horrific acts of crime and violence in our city. Like, that's inevitable. I'm wondering if there's support. Like, does Bell Media offer support to you for the shit you're going to see? Okay. I always ask this about people who had to cover like very notorious serial killer, like Paul Bernardo type trials and stuff and everything like that. Okay. And again, I know I said a name of somebody, but that you have your rules, I might. Okay. But that side of it, the people in the media need support when they're covering such terrible acts of violence and crime. But what about the victims who are re-traumatized by the media, right? Because they got to soak in their stories on a regular basis. And like you said, you're purposely not naming names for a variety of reasons. You were well said there. But do we have sufficient support for these two?
Hell no. There's like no support. Victim services in this country is deplorable. There's a homicide survivor that I've been supporting recently in Toronto. I hired by a nonprofit to support the survivor with the media. And this is someone who is struggling with meeting basic needs after her son was murdered, like housing. You would think that, because in Toronto you can call 311 and say, my neighbor's not bringing in their green bin or whatever. Raccoons like on my compost. 100%. You'd think that there's a number that homicide survivors can call and be like, I cannot keep my head above water. I cannot pay the bills. I need to find a different place to live. There's not. There's nothing. We have victim services, which is totally insufficient. And I'm not slamming Toronto Police Victim Services because they're mostly run by volunteers and they're drowning in things like intimate partner violence cases and all these things. Very important things. Doug Ford's government has taken away victim services, like funding, everything. It is deplorable. There's nobody for a homicide survivor to call and be like, the media's knocking on my door, help. So that's something I was trying to fill that void. Some homicide investigators are more helpful than others, but at the end of the day, they're investigating a homicide. Right. They don't have time to help you write a statement.
And you're not educated and trained in the practice,
No, most trauma survivors, and this is something I found in my research, not surprisingly perhaps, most trauma survivors have never had an interaction with the media prior to their traumatic loss.
Right.
Despite this, the majority of them are contacted by members of the media in the immediate aftermath of their traumatic loss, which I defined as the first 72 hours. And the majority of them have negative first experiences with the media. And in fact, most of the homicide and traffic fatality survivors that I surveyed told me that the media actually contributed to their trauma.
Yeah,
and many of them actually said the media had direct long-term negative impacts on them, to the point that, decades later, their self-esteem is still awful and they keep their heads down in public, and people who really suffered under the crush of media attention. So what responsibility does the journalist have? We have a responsibility, in the words of Toronto homicide survivor Shauna Brown, whose son, Damal Graham, was murdered on, I shouldn't be doing this because I might get it wrong, and I apologize, Shauna, but I think it was July 23rd, 2017. Her son was murdered. And in the words of her, if you're going to come in and and open this trauma lid and take all this hugely emotional stuff out of us, you have a responsibility to close that lid before you leave.
Right.
And we don't. We're like, okay, thank you. And we are taking... I'm going to quote somebody else here now, Duncan McHugh, CBC journalist who's done amazing work on reporting on Indigenous communities. I always quote him on this. He has this brilliant lesson: be a storyteller, not a story taker. Right. We in the media take stories. Thank you. And we're so grateful. Thank you so much. I can't believe you spent this time. We're so grateful. Why are we grateful? Because they're giving us something. What are we giving them? We're not giving them support. We're not even calling to check up on them hours later. We're just, because for me, I always felt like me re-entering their lives would be harmful. Like, they're going to see my number come up and they're their stress response is going to go up. And isn't that telling? Like, if I was afraid that me calling them after the fact was going to cause them harm, then I should have known that I was doing something wrong to begin with. But there's no follow-up, and there's nobody there to support them from like the institutional level. So I, like this podcast that I do, I'm here promoting this podcast, Mike, not because I'm making money. I don't make a penny out of most of the stuff that I do on this. It's because I'm trying to affect institutional change where journalists need to change the way they're doing things. Homicide investigators need to, victim services, the freaking government, the world. We need to have more empathy, but we need to take better care of trauma survivors. And my little piece in it is trying to support them with the media, which can be a hugely impactful thing for them when they are forced to suffer on the public stage.
So it's up to you. Like, I'm listening and I'm thinking, because we apparently are doing a shitty job when it comes to victim services, and you're talking about at a time when we should be investing more in this. It sounds like the current government, the progressive conservative government in this province, is slashing.
And I don't want to just put this on Doug Ford, because traditionally, historically, we've done a deplorable job taking care of victims in this country at every level of government.
But the buck stops there. I mean, if it's if he's taking cutting, I use terrible choice of words there, but if he's reducing the spend on such services, the buck stops there, right? So, literally, right, yeah, literally, right. See how good I am at this, Tamara. Tell everyone at 1010 what's going on over here. Okay. Yes. But shout out to John Moore, a future FOTM, but sadly it'll be an exit interview. But
no,
hopefully not for
soon.
60 years.
Yes,
not for 60.
John Moore
years.
will hopefully be one of those guys that leaves on his.
Well, he's very good. He's very good
on his own fruition.
Yeah, and he's doing very well over there. I understand, and I like him very much.
Yep.
I like him very much here. But just so I could recap the things that you personally are doing, but it's wild that it's all on your shoulders here. My goodness gracious, Tamara. There's 3 things going on that I can follow. One is you have a podcast called The Trauma Beat, and someone right now could pause this podcast and subscribe to The Trauma Beat. So these are ongoing, right? You're on season what?
Season 2.
Season 2.
It's basically like people.
Can I ask you, what the fuck are seasons in
That's
podcast
so funny.
world?
Jim Richards asked me that last night.
He's right. Jim
What's
is
up
right.
with the season? So you know why I do it? It's because I don't have time to do this shit, and I just do it because I'm like, somebody needs to hear this conversation. And so I just get 10 or 11 episodes together, and I package them all up, and I get all the social media content out, and then I just sort of automate it and push it out because I don't actually have time to be doing this shit.
Okay. So yesterday, Donovan Bailey's over here, and we're recording
Just
running
name drop.
Yeah, well, I'm running things specifically. Donovan Bailey running things, and it's fantastic. It actually does very well on YouTube, but that's a whole other story. But it's a great podcast, and we're on season 4. Okay,
awesome.
And I'm like a hired gun, like whatever you want, Mr. Bailey. It's your show, but I just don't believe in it. Like there's no.
I just can't commit to it. That's why. It's like when I did season 1 of the Trauma Beat podcast. I thought that
Tamara,
would be it.
You just drop when you are inspired to
I know I
record
should.
new content.
I know, but I just don't have time.
It's a living, breathing organism.
I prefer to just have it all done so that I can focus on other things.
Okay, well,
I wish that I had time. I would love to do that.
No, I'm not criticizing the frequency of your release.
I know, but
it's
I feel
more
like I know, but I feel like then people
Okay.
are expecting that eventually I'll put another one out. But I need a
That's in your head.
finality, and then if I come back, I come back. If I don't, I don't.
Okay, fair enough. So it's your show. Who am I to backseat drive?
No,
here?
you're
Okay.
an expert. I don't know anything about podcasts.
Well, there's a lot
I don't know
of
what
things
the
that
hell
people
I'm
do.
doing.
There's a lot of things in the podcasting world that people do that I just fundamentally disagree with.
I just don't
and one
know
of the
how to
things you know what I don't like,
podcast.
Tamara? Your show may be a little different, but I don't like it when somebody has this is a long form conversation you and I are having.
And that's
it will
what
be
I do
unedited.
too. Yep.
But
me too.
I don't like it and it happens all over the place.
Yes.
This will be recorded, but this will be released in September.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the woman
I'm
of Valerie
guilty
Pugh
of
did
that
this.
just because I wait until I have enough episodes and I put it.
So put that on the list of things
But
I
it's
don't
like timeless
believe in.
things.
Okay, but nothing's timeless.
No,
we
but
literally talked about Game 4.
You're a podcaster. I am not a
Okay.
podcaster.
But they're talking about the Game 4 of Oilers versus
I
Panthers.
dabble in podcasting. Just like I am not
Okay.
a TV reporter. I'm still a newspaper reporter, even though I spent most of my career in
Well, you're
television.
wrong. Tamara, I got news for you. Okay, so you've got the
Literally.
podcast.
Yes.
You've got the book. How can somebody get their mitts on this book right now? And I'm going to give the full title. It's called The Trauma Beat, A Case for Rethinking the Business of Bad News.
You can come into Toronto Mike's basement, and I'll give you your copy that I bought for you.
Come
before
to
I forget.
TMLX 15 on June 27, and then I have a gift for you after you give me this gift.
You're so sweet. But
already given you a lot
can
of
get it
gifts.
wherever you
More.
get your books. And if your bookstore doesn't carry it, be like, why aren't you carrying the Trauma Beat?
Everybody, I have the Trauma Beat in my hands because I had a PDF and now I have
something
a,
else for you. And now guess
Oh,
what?
and it's signed. It says,
guess what?
Mike, you're my favorite podcaster.
These are my favorite 5-cent candies, and I brought them to you for your birthday.
They look Scandinavian.
They are from IKEA.
Okay, that is
and they
Swedish.
are the best.
Shout out to the Sedin twins.
Yes, they're the
Sedin.
best.
I can't even say their name. I never liked the Sedin twins because I don't care for the Canucks at all. At least with what I like about the Oilers, and I used to like the Oilers in the 80s when Gretzky and Messier and Curry and Paul Coffey, I loved those Oilers teams because our Leafs sucked and they were so fun to watch.
You're talking to me like I know anything about sports.
But I will just say...
The thing I know about the Vancouver Canucks is my friend Joe O'Connell loves them.
By the way, my wife, 11 years married tomorrow. It's our anniversary tomorrow.
Congratulations.
But we watched all these Edmonton playoff games. And what I will say is there is no player on the planet who skates like Connor McDavid. Like, this is literally
I've heard
forget generational. You know, I can't think. I mean, shout out to Mike Gartner. There's nobody I've seen who can skate like that man. So
my brother often talks about him.
He's unbelievable.
I couldn't tell you what Connor McDavid
at the same time, ask me how many goals Connor McDavid has scored in the Stanley Cup Finals.
How many goals?
0. Although I saw that after I went to bed last night, he had a couple of nice assists. Okay, so let me thank you for that, the Trauma Beat. So you have the book, you have the podcast. The one more thing we have talked about in great length, but if somebody is a victim and wants to speak to you in your guise of pickup communications, which is the public relations firm that you started that supports trauma survivors and the stakeholders who surround them. How can somebody reach out to you in that guise?
So the first thing I would say is if you're working with a nonprofit or a police agency, encourage them to hire me to support you. Okay. But that probably won't happen. So you can be like,
and you
one
do
of
speak
them,
a little Portuguese. Let's put it out there.
Un pouquinho.
Okay, because that's going to tie into the gift I'm about to give you.
So, cool. So my, I do a lot of pro bono work, and because trauma survivors find me all the time just through my website, pickupcommunications.com.
Right.
And so most of the work that I do with survivors is pro bono, but I unfortunately have to turn some people away because I just don't have the capacity.
Well, there's only one of you.
There's only one of me, and there's a big mortgage and
children
and a podcast that I do, and like millions of kids in my house. And but yeah, I do a lot of pro bono work, and they can find me at pickupcommunications.com. I'll also say that I've got some resources on there for trauma survivors who have questions about the media, and I've got a lot of resources on there for journalists, storytellers who are looking to do these very important stories better.
And again, I feel like we didn't quite, I feel like I need hours more with you, to be honest, because you're kind of fascinating. But we joked about, is there still a chorus? Well, I think there's still a chorus, for at least for a bit more time. So there's chorus, there's which owns Global News, and then we have Rogers and we have Bell. Of course, there is the Mother Core, CBC. I'm sure there's others, but these are the big television ones that pop in my head right away. Bottom line is, what should they be doing for people like you on the front lines? For the Austin Delaney's, the Steve Ryans, the Tamara Cherries. Now, only Steve there is still there, I guess, of those. But I'm thinking, like, you know.
So peer support networks, all this stuff, obviously unlimited therapy, encourage people to do it, limit trauma exposures. Don't send the guy who just shot the car crash to the funeral the next day and then to another car crash, and all those things, which the reason I sort of stream over them is because there are people out there who are doing a great job advocating for these things. People like Dave Seglins at CBC, who is their self-proclaimed well-being champion,
But will there be a CBC after the next election?
Who knows? Yeah. Will Dave Seglin's salary be paid to be taking care of all these journalists across the country? Who freaking knows? I hope so. Anyway, the reason I sort of gloss over that is because the thing that newsrooms around the world are missing as they all start to dabble in, we care about journalists' well-being. Hooray for you. Good for you for finally catching on to that. The thing they're all missing is you cannot adequately take care of yourself unless you take care of the people you're reporting on. So train your people in trauma-informed journalism, because Mike, I've said this a million times and it is true. So I used, I think, $400 worth of therapy benefits when I was at CTV. And because it was not there, just like any newsroom in the city at the time, it was not a newsroom that promoted self-care on a regular basis. And there's going to be people there that are like, yes, we did. We sent out an email after the Toronto van attack reminding you of our EAP. Yeah, but there's nothing for the daily news grind and that mother that I'm interviewing on a daily basis. But what I will say is, you need to teach your people how to take care of the people they're reporting on, because I spent a lot more money on therapy now out of my own pocket when I don't have benefits, dealing with moral injury suffered from the job, than I have on vicarious trauma, for which I've spent a lot of money as well.
Because you gotta carry that briefcase, if you will, for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And good on you though for speaking to somebody about it and learning, how to manage and cope with.
I'm on the therapy. I'm on the drugs.
Okay, good
I'm
on you.
on the meditation.
So encourage people to speak to a therapist and ensure that they have these organizations are paying for this therapy.
And take no for an answer. If your journalist says the family's not talking, I say, okay, thank you. And how are you doing? Did they slam the door in your face? Did somebody try to hit you? Did they tell you you're a piece of shit?
I always think, did you see a body part on the ground?
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean?
Especially the videographers out there, the stuff that they see. Did you see a person dying today? Oh my God, you were at that scene where that guy literally he died in front of you. Are you okay? Do you need to take some time?
Right.
Are you talking to somebody? My door is open.
Right.
And not, oh, look I'm tracking your company vehicle. Your GPS says, I know you just left that scene, but there's another thing that just happened 2 blocks away. There's sound of gunshots and there's like a kid on the ground. Can you go over there? Like, this is our business.
How
is
enlightening.
crazy.
As a complete outsider who didn't know what GA meant, I find all this quite fascinating.
FTOM.
You're an FOTM.
No, FOTM, yeah.
FOTM, friend of Toronto Mike. You've earned, so you've got the lasagna, you've got the beer, you got the book about Toronto Maple Leafs baseball. You now have that business card has a QR code. If you scan it, you will subscribe to season 6.
Cool.
Well, you'll subscribe to, yes. So I just made fun. I just realized I did a whole diatribe against seasons. Meanwhile.
Season 6 of what?
Yeah, but I don't produce that show, okay? But I asked you earlier if you speak Portuguese. Because El Grego, who hosts that show, he speaks Portuguese.
Elliot Brasileiro?
And his
Brazilian
birthday
or
was
Portuguese?
yesterday.
Where is he from?
He's of Portuguese descent. So
okay, so it's a little bit different. They like to say vocês, whereas in Sao Paulo, where my husband's from, it's vocês. I like Southern Brazil. Portuguese
okay, it's sort of
better.
like Quebec French versus Paris French. I understand.
Yes.
Okay, so you have a wireless speaker from Moneris to subscribe to Yes, We Are Open, so you can listen to season 6, because sometimes seasons make sense. And Al Grego is just had a birthday yesterday, so happy birthday, Al Grego. Everybody subscribe to Yes, We Are Open.
Had a beans.
Recycle My Electronics. Tamara, I'm sure that you're in your home in Regina and you have all this gear that you've been using over the years for recording, and some of it may be broken or obsolete or just needs to be thrown out. Don't put it in the garbage, because then those chemicals end up in our landfill. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca. Put in your postal code and it'll tell you where to go, where you can get it properly recycled, so that stuff doesn't end up in our landfill. So thank you, Recycle My Electronics. Thank you, Moneris. Thank you, Tamara. How was this? I think
great. I'm surprised we didn't talk more about Ridley Funeral Homes, considering the topics that we were discussing.
Well, I try to be respectful, so I feel like sometimes I need to not do that, because it's not always.
Oh, the tape!
Right, I'm sorry.
I've wondered, why do they give
There's a measuring tape?
Why? Is this for measuring caskets?
I asked Brett. It's essentially something that should make your life better, right? So while you're living...
I actually love these kinds of measuring tapes. That I don't know if people can hear the click, click, click. I find so satisfying.
You can hear that. Well, you can do that like 24/7, because now you have your own Ridley Funeral measuring tape.
As I drive around the GTA today.
So as you drive around the GTA today, and you were kind of clear. So basically, CTV Toronto says to you, we want to package you out, because we want, unless you want to become like a video /
No, they didn't want to package me out. Okay. They're like, please stay.
So I feel like we didn't get that. Okay, so they said, don't go anywhere. You're one of the good ones. Tamara.
But I said, hell no, I'm out of here. And then I went to HR and I said, so is there going to be like an exit interview? And they said, we don't really do that for this kind of thing. I'm like, because I just had a 2.5 hour conversation with these people, and HR was supposed to be there and they weren't. Don't you want to know why somebody who you really want working here is leaving? And they didn't want to know. So I hope it's different now.
That's fucking awful to hear that too, because how the hell you retain good people if you don't listen to their gripes on the way out as to why they're leaving? And
I shouldn't be talking about this stuff.
But why?
Actually.
You don't work for Bell Media.
Yeah, well, it's funny, but I'm on News Talk 1010 every
Bell Media,
week.
who?
No, it's but I do work for them when I do fill-in hosting. Not anymore.
Right. When you do your round table, they don't even give you a palma pasta lasagna.
I know, but they give a shout out for my book.
You got way more stuff.
You did.
For
I've got
visiting
the
me.
loot. I think I'm going to be checking a bag when I go back to Regina. Hello.
Is that lasagna coming home with you?
I'm going to give it to my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, who I'm staying with.
Okay, good. Don't leave without it. How was this? I'm curious, because you tweeted something about being very excited for this. But when I saw the tweet, I said, I don't want to disappoint Tamara.
No,
like I
it
can
was
only
really
be myself
great.
and do my thing.
I love long form conversations. So yesterday morning, I did a pre-tape segment with CTV Your Morning, Bell Media, which I'm so grateful for. I had a great conversation with Anne-Marie there, and
Merwique.
yeah, but it's so quick. It's like you're just trying to get everything out, all the important
How much
points.
time did they give you on?
I
Your Morning?
actually, that one actually felt longer than usual. It's probably like 5 minutes or 6 minutes, but
5
it's
minutes.
usually like 4 minutes for a morning show. And then, last night I did Jim Richards. We did 2 segments, which is like 20 minutes of talking.
Okay, Jim's got more time.
But there's still as you can tell, Mike, I could talk for days on this stuff. And so I always
Can I tell you why this exists? Because I got tired of seeing somebody like Tamara Cherry on CTV's Your Morning and hearing her for 5 to 7 minutes, and then that was like highlight, headline
It's
stuff.
still a great platform, and I'm so grateful for it. But I appreciate people who appreciate thoughtful conversations, and I think in the world we live in right now, there's no room for thoughtful conversations. You're either on this side of a topic or this side of a topic, and you are bound to offend somebody if you ask a question about something. And so the opportunity to sit and actually talk about important stuff is very appreciated by me. So thank you.
And I appreciate you dropping by because you're not in town very long, right? When do you leave?
Sunday morning.
Coming in on a Sunday morning. I kept singing Creed, for goodness sakes. Oh my goodness. I'll fix that in post, Tamara.
Wow, I haven't heard that band name for a long time.
Well, when you said Sunday morning, there's so many, you could do Velvet Underground. You could do No Doubt, has a great song called Sunday
love No
Morning.
Doubt. I'm trying to get my
Sunday
daughter into
morning.
it. Yes. Oh, and Maroon 5, isn't there one like Sunday morning, rain
Possibly.
is falling?
I don't listen to Maroon 5. I'm more of a Creed man. You
Apparently.
know that. Come on. My goodness gracious. Okay. Shout out to Nickelback from Alberta. So all the prairie people.
Nickelback's from Alberta? I didn't even know.
Yeah, come on. Everybody knows that, Tamara. Come
don't
on.
know.
Don't you know what
I know
GA stands for?
Gaynor the Gopher in Saskatchewan. GTHA? I know that.
That I don't know. So you're educating me again.
GTHA? Greater Toronto, Hamilton.
Oh, yeah, that I know. I thought you were talking about some gopher.
Oh, Gaynor the Gopher is the
What are you
mascot
talking
for the
about?
Saskatchewan Roughriders. Get with the program.
No, come on. Anyways, we'll talk about that another
You're
episode.
not an Argos fan because
I
anytime I
root for
went
the
to an
Argos.
Argos and Rough Riders game, there was more green there than there was blue.
But I root for the Argos. I like that they exist, and I root
Really?
for them.
You just like
and,
the idea of them?
I did want Mike Hogan's an FOTM. He's involved there, and I actually wanted to do like hype up Argos on this very program, and I had an idea, and I thought it would involve me getting like a press pass to attend games and then talk about it on the show, and that you're missing out on this value, and then. I fielded this idea because I knew Argos needed some love in this market, and I wanted to give it to them. And I wasn't asking for money. I just thought you could send me to the game or whatever. And then a guy from sales called me back to follow up, and then it was a sales call, and then I said, "Oh, okay," and then that was the end of that. Okay. But much love to Tamara Cherry. You're now an FOTM,
Thank
and
you. Thanks
I
for
love
having
this
me.
very much. And that brings us to the end of our 1,506th show. You can follow me all over the place. Just go to torontomike.com, but I'm on Twitter as Toronto Mike and Blue Sky as Toronto Mike. You'll find me. Tamara, just send them somewhere where they could learn more about you. and your
Easiest
work.
place, pickupcommunications.com.
Speaking of Alberta, it's called Pickup Communications. Okay.
Not why.
Because there's pickup trucks. Everyone's got a
No,
pickup
it's because
truck.
that's what you call a pickup, is when you're going to get the picture of the dead kid that was killed yesterday coming up in Journal. And Tamara, go get the pickup. That's why it's called it. Fun
Okay,
fact.
so no shout out to Dodge Ram and the great
No.
John Gallagher. Okay. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery, Palma Pasta, RecycleMyElectronics.ca, the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, Moneris, and Ridley Funeral Home. See you all Sunday morning. See, it's all coming back to Sunday morning, because on Sunday morning I'm dropping a special Father's Day episode of Toronto Mic'd. Don't you dare miss it. Father's Day episode, Sunday morning. You might need some tissues. See
Happy
you
Father's
all.
Day, Mike.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the Trauma Beat. See you all Sunday.
Everything is coming out rosy and green. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today. And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine, and it won't go away. 'Cause everything is rosy and gray. Well, I've kissed you in France, and I've kissed you in Spain. And I've kissed you in places I better not name. And I've seen the sun go down could.